What if it rained food? What if Earth was a cube? What if we had 9 lives? What if bits could fly? It's absurd. If money grew on trees, if we didn't have knees, if we walked through life slightly magnetical, it's absurd. Absurd Hypotheticals.
Hello everybody and welcome to Absurd Hypotheticals, the show we overthink dumb questions so you don't have to. I'm your host Marcus Lehner, and I'm joined here today by Chris Yee and Ben Storms. Say hi, guys.
Hey, I'm Chris.
Hey, I'm Ben.
Guys, for our wonderful 99th episode, we're going to take a complete left from what we normally do and talk about animals.
We're going to run out of animals eventually.
Yeah, so I think this one came about just because we had so many different animal questions that couldn't quite make a full episode. So we fell back on our good friend, the grab bag. So today, instead of answering just one hypothetical question, each of us is taking a different hypothetical question about animals, overarching theme here. And we all did our own answer. We each covered one answer for one question instead of all covering the same question. I don't know why that was hard to explain.
Pretty simple concept.
Very simple concept. So, Ben, you had our very first question, so why don't you start?
Yeah, so the question that we are leading off with here is, what if the entire world was powered by hamsters? And we mean like literal electrical power.
I thought you were going to say hamsters again. Literal electrical hamsters.
Literal electrical hamsters. I mean, I guess technically it is literally electrical hamsters. No, it's not literally electrical hamsters. I mean, it's figurative. I don't know. Anyway, English was hard. Point being, we're going to power the world with hamsters. So I guess to get started, we have to figure out how much power a hamster can actually generate. So figured the cleanest way to do this with regards to hamster powering something is running on a wheel, because that's the thing that hamsters just do naturally. Well, not I guess naturally, but hamsters run naturally. We put them on wheels, they figure it out. You get the idea. So we can calculate the amount of work that a hamster does running on a wheel, right? So work is basically just the force, applied to something over a distance. It's measured in joules, while 1 joule is the force of 1 Newton acting on an object in the direction of that force's motion for a distance of 1 meter. So pretty similar. Simply, you can break work down into just force times distance. So in this case, the force applied is going to be just the mass of the hamster. So that's what the hamster is moving. The most popular pet hamster breed is the Syrian hamster or golden hamster or teddy bear hamster. It's very cute. Which is what you think of when you think of a hamster. It's that hamster, right? An adult Syrian hamster weighs 4.2 to 4.4 ounces or around 120 grams. The distance it's moving is going to be just the distance the hamster moves, which it turns out that Syrian hamsters will actually run around 9 kilometers or 5.5 miles per day, which is absurd. I want to put it out there that that's absolutely bonkers, right? Hamsters are really little.
Yeah.
I guess kilometers are bigger.
It's more than
for
I
them.
move around.
Yeah, right, exactly, right? It's pretty embarrassing when you think about it. So we can use that. We can figure out that the work done by a hamster in 1 day is 10,584 joules, which to move it into a unit that's used actually for power is 0.00294 kilowatt hours. So what's a kilowatt hour? I think we talked about this at some point in the show before, but just to review, a kilowatt hour is pretty simple. It's the amount of power used if you're using 1 kilowatt of power for 1 hour. I know, it's complicated.
I like how you prefaced that by saying we talked about it before and that it was complicated, and you're gonna come up and then it's it's the unit is what
it's
it is.
Literally exactly what it sounds like. It's literally just the 2 things in the name. Sometimes science makes things a little bit easier, and I appreciate it. So we have our power generation, but it's actually not quite that simple, because when you generate power through a mechanical process like this, you're gonna have losses. This is just because these systems aren't perfect, right? So to start off, you're gonna lose some power just because of the motion of the wheel, right? It's not moving perfectly smoothly. You're going to lose some power that way. I'm not going to lie, I couldn't find an exact amount of or percentage of power lost from a hamster wheel. For some reason, that number wasn't available online. So what I used instead for these losses is I found an article on bike generators that describe the losses from that, which is pretty much the same, principles. So we're just going to use those numbers instead. So you got the loss from the wheel, and the bike generators, that loss is around 10 to 20% of the power generated. you're going to need a battery because hamsters are nocturnal. And I want to use my power not just at night, personally. So we're going to store it in a battery.
Reverse solar power problem.
Right, exactly. If you have hamsters and a sun, you can power anything you want to.
Well, any time you want, not anything.
Well, okay. I'm going to point out, if you have a sun, you can probably power anything you want to.
Okay, fair.
Fair.
And enough
All right.
hamsters, so continue.
Yeah. In the battery, you're going to lose 10 to 35% of the power as well. And then finally, to get it out of the battery, you're going to need a converter to move it back into alternating current, and that's going to lose another 5 to 15%. So your total loss is somewhere between 42 and 67.5%, which, side note, this is why bike generators suck, because you have to do a lot of work to get even less power than you should expect you should be getting. So anyway, best case scenario, let's say we're getting down to 42% loss. That's going to give us 0.0017 kilowatt hours. So let's give some context for that number. So something we all have to, I assume we all have to do because you're listening to a podcast. How much do you need to charge your phone? So I found a test where someone had basically measured the drain of their phone during an overnight charge. So they used an iPhone 6 Plus, and the charging took on average 19.2 watt hours. So our hamster is doing 0.0017 kilowatt hours, which is 1.7 watt hours, which means that your one hamster is going to take 11.3 days to charge a phone, which is not ideal. However, I'm going to say that is the pessimist's glass half empty way to think about things. I'm going to say as an optimist that what it means is that if you have 12 hamsters, you can charge your phone in one night. There you go. So from there, let's scale up a little bit. So what if you want to power your whole home with hamsters? So in 2018, the average annual electric consumption for a U.S. residential utility customer, so that's not just full homes, it includes apartments and stuff, but it's going to be a pretty good average, was 10,972 kilowatt hours per year, which is about 30 kilowatt hours per day. So using that 0.0017 kilowatt hours per hamster, we're going to need about 17,647 hamsters to power a home, which is getting a little problematic because you're probably going to need several more homes to store that many hamsters. But we can still go bigger because really we need to, powering one home is not enough because we're powering everything. So I figured that the obvious next step would be to see how many hamsters it would take to replicate a nuclear power plant, since not as much of our power as nuclear probably should be, but a decent chunk is. So that's a good starting point. So the smallest nuclear power plant in the United States is the R.E. Gena nuclear power plant in New York. Has a single reactor, so that's a pretty good test case for our hamster system. In 2018, that power plant generated 4,689,440,000 kilowatt hours, which is about 2.7 trillion hamsters worth. We're going to have to cut this because that's a year. Hold on.
Oh, wait, my entire answer's wrong.
Oh, no. Oh, no. It's not. It's not entirely wrong, but I have to do some math really quickly. Hold on. Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad I caught that as it happened instead of right after Chris started doing his answer or something.
It's not a giant water drop situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my god, that one.
So in 2018, this plant generated a total of about 4.7 trillion kilowatt hours, which is about 12.8 billion kilowatt hours per day. So in hamster power, this is going to require around 7.557 billion hamsters, which admittedly, it's a lot, right? It's a lot of hamsters.
It's like a hamster per person.
Yeah. So we're getting some scale problems, which, speaking of, we obviously have to put all these hamsters somewhere. So if, hypothetically, like we do on this show, we were going to make this hamster nuclear plant, how big would it have to be? So from what I can see, the minimum humane hamster cage size is about 2 cubic feet. They recommend it's 1 by 2 feet, rectangle that's a foot tall. So that's going to be about 15 billion cubic feet. Renting a warehouse, the cubic foot cost is around 25 to 45 cents per cubic foot. I'm assuming this is per month. I couldn't actually find that stated anywhere. I looked in a bunch of places, and they all just quoted the same prices, but never how frequently. So
Whether it was building it or buying it or renting it?
right, I think I'm assuming from the context it looked like a rental, so I'm going to assume it's rental per month, which means that we'd be spending about $1.9 trillion to $3.4 trillion. Billion dollars. Sorry, lost my units. $1.9 billion to $3.4 billion on hamster storage every month. Although admittedly, it probably costs more than that to run a nuclear. No, it doesn't cost more than that to run a nuclear plant.
No, not $1 billion.
It does not. No, that would be the nail in the coffin from nuclear power, wouldn't it? Yeah. And the average warehouse in 2019 was about 184,000 square feet and roughly 30 feet tall. So it'd be about 2,500 warehouses full of hamsters. Obviously, we're ignoring, food and water and, oh God, the poop problem.
Oh, we have a poop problem.
But I guess overall, it would be, obviously, expectedly pretty impractical to run everything off of hamsters. And just because I couldn't help myself, I also, of course, had to calculate how many hamsters it would take to power the entire United States. I'll just jump for the end. It's about 6.4 trillion hamsters. I honestly don't think there's that many hamsters in the world.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. What's the population of hamsters?
Yeah, so I really tried on that one. I knew that was going to be a question that came up. I couldn't find that. The closest I could find was an estimate of 300,000 hamsters as pets in the UK in 2018, which, that means there's definitely a lot of hamsters in the world, but it's definitely in the scale of, millions, not trillions. I think if there were trillions of hamsters in the world, we probably wouldn't notice. So overall, I think the big thing we've learned here is that hamsters are pretty inefficient in generating power, slackers. Although, I did find there is one additional way we could actually generate power from hamsters, and that power has been generated from hamsters, which is just by their natural movement. So there was an experiment that Rusin Yang, Yongqin, Shang Li, and Guangzhou and Zhonglin Wang did in 2009. They wrote a paper called "Converting Biomechanical Energy into Electricity by a Muscle Movement-Driven Nanogenerator," where basically what they did was make tiny little vests out of these like conductive threads, and then put them. Well, the first thing they did was put them on their fingers and mimed clicking and typing and stuff, and basically the stretching of the muscles created piezoelectric potential, which then we were able to attach and actually generate 0.1 to 0.15 volts just from these small movements. What they then also did was make a tiny vest and put on a hamster and did the same thing. Because, I don't know, I guess that's the next step once you've done it on your hand.
I'm imagining, isn't there a movie? It's reminding me of a spy hamster movie that I think exists.
There was that one, I think was it guinea pigs?
G-Force or something?
G-Force, it was guinea pigs, right? Hold on.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
this is
hamsters, it was guinea pigs.
Yeah, I think it was G-Force. I'm glad that G-Force, if you Google G-Force, I don't know if this is because of my search history or just the world in general. If you Google just G-Force, the film is the second thing that comes up, which is really funny. Nicolas Cage was in this?
Yes, this is exactly the movie I was imagining.
And Steve Buscemi. Wow, this is something. Sam Rockwell, Tracy Morgan, Penelope Cruz. Well then, okay. That's something.
I'll say it's also the second result in my Google history, in my Google search. So
it was directed by Hoyt H. Yeatman.
Yeatman! That is the only thing he has directed, although he did work with Jerry Bruckheimer on Armageddon, Con Air, and The Rock. So that's, apparently he was a visual effects guy before this, and I would guess also a visual effects guy after this.
Well, he clearly wasn't a director after it.
Yes, no, this is literally the only thing he has directed. I like that on the Wikipedia page, it notes that G-Force role director notes debut film. That is true. Also only film.
And best film. But his worst film.
Yeah.
And his longest film.
It's all true. What was I even saying? Jesus.
The vests. You're talking about the vests.
Anyway, yeah, I guess you could also put a little vest on the hamsters so that you get some extra power. I couldn't get any, this is obviously not a thing that people have done beyond this one study, and they didn't have any convenient numbers there, or really all that many numbers at all. They were pretty much just focused more on, it working than the power generation from the hamster. That wasn't really the goal. So I couldn't get any good numbers on how much we'd increase our generation by. I'm not going to lie. I don't think it would be that much.
Why don't they put this material on like people instead of
So
hamsters?
I think that was the I remember hearing about this like in Wired back when it first happened. I think the idea eventually was that you'd buy like a hooded sweatshirt or something that would be made with this material in it, and then you could like plug your phone into it as you like walked around and you charge your phone. I just think it's some combination of expensive and not good enough that it hasn't really come to fruition.
It also might fall into the technological sinkhole that is people don't want to wear something stupid.
Right. Well, I mean, you could weave it in.
I mean, there's Snuggies. Snuggies exist.
It would, yeah, I don't know. I guess overall, if the world was powered by hamsters, we'd have a lot more hamsters around, and I guess that's probably a pretty clear takeaway, huh? I don't really have one other than that.
I mean, I just need you to say trillions of hamsters at some point in this answer. That's all I wanted out
Trillions
of
of hamsters. Yeah, we got there. We got the stupid number of hamsters. Anyway, Chris, what did you do?
So the question I covered was, what if your heart beat as fast as hummingbirds? So I'm going to start with the short answer. You would die.
All right, cool.
it. All right,
That's
my
the short
turn.
answer. The long answer, let's get more into it.
You would die.
Yeah. So a hummingbird's heart beats at, it varies a little bit. Like if they're flying, it can get up to 1,260 beats per minute, which is 21 beats per second, which is crazy to me.
What in the fudge?
Yeah.
Animals are cool.
It is a cool fact. So the normal heart rate for a human at resting rate, it ranges from 60 to 100 beats per minute, depending on like how healthy you are.
I'm going to say it can be lower than that also. My resting heart rate is like 40.
Yeah, Ben, we get it. Your heart rate's low.
I run. Anyway, continue.
Yeah,
Just saying.
that's the resting heart rate. So if you're exercising and stuff, obviously your heart rate's going to be higher. So the upper limit of like a healthy heart rate while you're exercising, it depends on your age. They say to subtract your age from 220, and that's the beats per minute that your system can handle. So what happens if you have a rapid heart rate? The medical term for a rapid heart rate is multifocal atrial tachycardia. And generally, a high heart rate in humans means that your heart is less efficient at pumping blood. And it means that you're less healthy. And that in turn means that you're circulating less oxygen throughout your body, even though your heart is beating faster. It's kind of counterintuitive like that. So like athletes, they're healthier and they have lower heart rates. Ben.
Well, yeah, that I like to think that at least.
Athlete's a strong word there.
It is. Thank you for calling me strong, Marcus.
I said the word was strong.
I mean, I'm going to hear what I want to hear.
So why is this like counterintuitive thing happening? Why does a fast heart rate mean you're less healthy? The reason is because if your heart is pumping faster, it has less time in between pumps for the chambers of your heart to fill with blood. So each pump is pumping less blood, which means that in order to pump the same amount of blood, your heart has to work twice as hard. And if it's pumping less blood per beat, that means it's pumping less oxygen per beat, and less oxygen is getting circulated in your body. So when I say high heart rate, I mean like 130 is what they're talking about, 130 beats per minute. Obviously, 1,260 beats per minute is way past that limit. So we're just like on a completely different level, and that level would probably kill you, as I alluded to in my short answer. But why doesn't this kill hummingbirds? Why do hummingbirds, how can they exist with this fast heartbeat? Part of it has to do with the size of their heart. So they have the largest heart to body ratio by weight of any animal. So their heart makes up 2.5% of their body weight. So since their heart is bigger, it doesn't have to pump the blood as far in the body. So it's easier to pump blood. And the other reason is because of red blood cells. So red blood cells are the primary way that we distribute oxygen throughout our body. And humans, so in men, they typically have 5 to 6 million red blood cells per microliter. And then women have 4 to 5 million per microliter. Hummingbirds have the highest concentration of red blood cells of any mammal. So they have 6.5 million per microliter. So that just means that they have more oxygen in their blood that's circulating around. So even though it's pumping faster, and with each pump it's pumping less blood, the oxygen is more concentrated. So that's sort of why it works in hummingbirds. So let's assume that it works in us too, that we don't have this inefficiency problem where our heart is not really working the way it's supposed to. Let's assume that it's the same amount of efficiency, it's just faster. So if this is the case, that means that with each pump of the heart, we're still circulating the same amount of oxygen. It's just there's way more pumps, so we're circulating way more oxygen than we actually need. And this is also bad. So if you have too much oxygen, it's what's called hyperoxia. And short-term effects of this, so you can get oxygen toxicity, and symptoms of this are nausea, vertigo, and severe spasmodic vomiting. That's the term they use,
no.
spasmodic vomiting. And then another symptom of this is an increase in what's called reactive oxygen species, or ROS for short. They're basically molecules that contain oxygen that react with biological tissue. So if these increase in your body, normally your body has antioxidants and it combats these, but if it increases in your body, then these antioxidants can get depleted. And what happens is that these ROS molecules, they oxidize with your tissue and your organs, which is not a good thing. So they've tested overexposure of oxygen in various animals, and these animals see symptoms like irritation, congestion, swelling of the lungs, and potentially death. So just another way you can die.
So that's why we don't have enough hamsters to power everything, is because we're busy stuffing them with oxygen.
Like, this will help, but it doesn't. So why doesn't this abundance of oxygen kill hummingbirds? Because again, we have a system that works in hummingbirds and they don't die. So the reason for this is because they have a super high metabolism. So excluding insects, hummingbirds actually have the highest metabolism of any animal. It's actually 100 times higher than an elephant. So metabolism, if you don't really know that much about metabolism, it's basically just the process of converting food into energy. And there are a lot of moving parts within metabolism that are related to metabolism, but one of the parts is called cellular respiration. And this is a part that basically takes the oxygen, uses the oxygen to break down the food. So we don't have the abundance of oxygen anymore because it's using it to break down the food. So hummingbirds, they use this process to break down the nectar that they drink. So they drink a lot of nectar that's high in sugar, and that in turn fuels their flight. That's why they kind of need that high metabolism. It's because they need to fly. So let's assume that we have this high metabolism and that we don't have the over-oxygenated problem anymore. If that's the case, that means we're going to be burning a lot of calories because metabolism burns calories. And if we're burning a lot of calories, that means that we need to increase our intake of calories. So I couldn't find exact numbers on this for like oxygen consumption. I had to approximate. So hummingbirds consume about 10 times the amount of oxygen per gram of muscle tissue as an elite human athlete. That basically just means that if we have this high metabolism, we would need to eat 10 times as much as an elite athlete in order to sustain ourselves. So I wanted to look at an example, as I wanted to pick an elite athlete. And for the person I picked Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Mainly because I had covered this in a previous episode, so I didn't have to look up anything. I just looked at my old notes. So in episode 59, I found that he eats 5,000 calories per day over 7 meals.
Freaking insane.
Yeah, I know. Now with our hummingbird metabolism rate, that means we would need to eat 50,000 calories per day. It's a lot of calories. Just to put that into context a little bit, chicken nuggets. If you were to only eat chicken nuggets, you would have to eat 848 chicken nuggets per day. Or if you were to only eat Big Macs, you'd have to eat 89 Big Macs per day to reach that 50,000 calories.
It was hard to imagine the chicken nuggets, but the 89 Big Macs really sits in my stomach.
Yeah, I don't think it would sit in your stomach. Not for that long, at least.
Well, if you had a high metabolism, it would.
Oh, fair enough. All right. It really does. it's a small enough but large enough number that it's comprehensible and still terrifying.
I know what it feels like to eat that second Big Mac, and it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, so you're going to have to eat a lot, but technically you could survive based on a caloric intake view, I guess. The problem is that if you have this high metabolism is actually fairly inefficient in the way it converts energy, and a lot of that energy is released as heat. So about 75% of the energy that you convert from food is released as heat. So the average person without a high metabolism releases about 60 joules of heat per second. Now, if we are consuming 50,000 calories per day, we are going to be releasing about 1,800 joules per second, which is 30 times the normal rate. So over the course of a day, that would add up to about 157 megajoules of heat per day. Now, you might be asking, how much is that actually? Because I don't know. I don't know what a joule is.
But I just
Ben
explained it.
It's how many kilowatt hours it is.
Well, so in terms of heat, 157 megajoules is enough energy to raise 1,500 liters of water from 0 degrees Celsius to 100 degrees Celsius. So from freezing to boiling.
Why'd you use the most, like... That's such a random amount of everything for that measure.
That's I looked up what a joule is, and that's the comparison they gave me. Well, not exactly, but I scaled it up.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, the reason I chose 1,500 liters of water, you might be asking, is because that's the typical amount of water that a hot tub holds.
Oh. Now it all makes sense.
Yeah. So if you are in a hot tub, it's completely insulated perfectly, and you sit in it and you have this high metabolism, and the water is at freezing temperature, by the end of the day, it will be boiling.
Girls, check this out. No, wait. Just wait.
Just wait
Several hours.
Just wait.
Yeah.
Just wait. Look, you can get in around you can get in around noon. It'll be nice. It'll be perfect then, and then you're going to want to very much at 1 o'clock get out again.
Right.
I mean, they're not going to be having to worry about that because you probably already figured out, but you cannot survive this heat.
Right.
So I tried to look up the combustion temperatures of skin. I couldn't find it, but in terms of water, up to 60% of the human body is made of water. And it's far less than 1,500 liters. So we would probably literally boil from the inside if we had this high metabolism.
I mean, it'll be sweet release after the 38th Big Mac.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I'd probably rather die from starvation than boiling from the inside. But we have a lot of options for how we're going to die. So that was the short answer, is we're going to die. But we might die in a lot of different ways. You don't know.
Yeah, there's not so much options as a betting pool.
Right. And that pool is going to raise to boiling in roughly a day.
Yeah.
That's the longest odds is the you drown in the hot tub you boil.
Right.
So that's what I had. Marcus, what did you do?
My question was, what if you were actually raised by wolves? So I thought this was actually just a straight fictional thing, and it kind of is and it kind of isn't. So there's some real life examples of what they'll say raised by wolves, but what they actually mean is feral children is the other technical term for them. The most famous of which a lot of the raised by wolves things are they had a movie and some couple books and all that. In the mid-40s, Marcos Rodriguez Pantoja was born, and at the age of 7, he was sold to from his family to another family, who then abandoned him, and then he was left out in the wilds. He survived alone in the wild for 15 years until he was 22 years old. So going through his story, he did encounter wolves during this time. So there was stories of him being, very young, and he would wander into I think it was like a storm. It was raining, and he wandered into a cave, not realizing it was a wolf cave, but there were wolf pups there, and he ended up, lying down next to the wolf pups. And when the wolf mother came home, instead of murdering him, actually kind of like helped him out, and she, shared with him the meat that she had hunted that she was sharing with her pup. So that was kind of nice. So they do have that. What it establishes, they do have that instinct to help. They would help a wolf mother would help a human child. Like, they have that mothering instinct and can transfer over a little bit. So good news for that. The wolf won't just eat you generally. What I found interesting about this, though, is kind of like the problems he had coming back into society. So, like, there's some obvious things like, speech problems, and like, he forgot, he would make animal noises, and he had trouble communicating and things. There was a funny story of one of his early days back. And I say back, he was like arrested because people reported somebody wandering around in the woods, and he got arrested and dragged away from the forest. He didn't like decide to come back to civilization. He was kind of forced to. But anyway, he was telling a story about one of the early days where there was a radio was playing in his room when he woke up, and he thought people were literally trapped inside the radio, and he couldn't find like a door or latch or anything, and he's like, oh god, those people have been in there for so long, and he smashed the radio open, which of course broke the radio, and the voices stopped, and he thought he murdered them.
How long was he with the wolves, and like what age did he come back?
So age 7 was when he was sold and abandoned. So age 7 was when he started off in the woods. And he was in the woods for 15 years until he was 22.
Okay.
And 7 sounds kind of old. I'll say this. He did not have a happy childhood. So I imagine he got less development than some other kids did. But interestingly, because what happens is he became kind of a case study for psychologists, because you're now taking the nurture away from the nature, so you can see what carries over for humans and what doesn't. So one of the things, he got back into civilization. He was able to actually pick up, language again, not without too much difficulty. Like I said, he had weird accents and things, and he had all sorts of animal sounds that he still liked to use. But the biggest thing missing that he never really recovered was being able to respond to social cues, because when we grow up, of course, you're surrounded by people all the time. You're always interacting with people, and you pick up all the things that are expected from you in a conversation. Like, what reaction you're going to get when you say things, all the subtle movements and all that. He just had like none of that. So, people say interacting with him was very difficult, because he would just, not that it was like unpleasant, but like he wouldn't look anybody in the eye. He would always, like, when he started talking to somebody, look like straight down at the ground, and he would just, go off on tangents and all these buck wild things. So it was kind of a study in kind of like the social interactions. The one big one that was a problem in his life that is kind of sad and I think a little funny at the same time was he would just get scammed a lot.
Oh.
like by people in the streets, and I'm sure like any other, like, here, try this, I'm selling that. So went out into the wilds, came to civilization, had some difficulty adjusting, got scammed a lot, and basically he just concluded that he liked living with the animals better, and he would like just as he aged, and he was part of human society, and people would come in for him for his story, and he moved to a few places to work in different places, but he would very regularly escape back into the wilds for periods of time, because he basically lived with animals, lived with people, and concluded that people suck.
Did you say what year this happened? Like what time period?
He was born 1946, so this was around the 60s.
Okay.
But interestingly, the Raised by Wolves story, goes back and back and back. There's another one in the 1800s in France, and by 1800s I mean literally 1800, where the wild child known as Victor of Aveyron was found. They don't know how long he was living out in the wild, but he was definitely, feral. And what I like about this one is that he came back into civilization, and this medical student, Jean-Marc Gaspard Itard, hoped to study him. So he kind of just took the boy in, intended to have him become civilized. So understand, he was able to get him to understand some spoken language, how to empathize with other humans, and he was able to get him to read simple words. But it was getting him to speak that was the problem. So when it came to speaking, Victor learned 2 words, lait and odieux, which are the French words for milk and oh god, which when I think about it, it's probably 2 of the more versatile words you could use. And then it goes on to say, Itard soon became frustrated with the lack of progression and gave up. Quote that Itard wrote of Victor after giving up on him. Finally seeing that the continuation of my efforts and the passing of time brought about no change, I resigned myself to the necessity of giving up any attempt to produce speech and abandoned my pupil to incurable dumbness. I'm just like, good job, Gene. Way to stick with it. Then the earliest one I have is the Hessian wolf children, which I couldn't find too much info about because most of it was actually in German. But this was a story from 1341 where reportedly, again, this was 1341, so grain of salt, the kid was 3 years old when he started his life in the woods. And they're saying this kid actually lived with a wolf pack, and the wolves would, share with him the meat from kills, and they would actually dig and build him a nest in the winter where they would dig him a hole and bring him leaves and things that he could cover himself with to, stave off some of the cold. It was written in a few places, like a few different sources from 1341, but who knows how accurate those are, I would say. I would, again, take it with a grain of salt. And he had a kind of a similar experience to Marcos, where he was brought into civilization, kind of paraded around a bit, like he was brought to a duke as a curiosity, as they say. And similarly, they tried to reintegrate him to society, and he came to the same conclusion that, living in the woods was better. People suck. And those are really the three main examples I could find of kids raised by wolves. There's a bunch more of feral children being raised by different things. Like there was a kid raised by a sheep, and then they have bears and dogs and things. I separated dogs and wolves. A bunch of people were raised by the family dog, quote unquote, after the parents died or in an accident or something, and the family dog would help protect the kid. And then they would say the kid was raised by the dog, and it's like, well, were they? Kind of, maybe, sort of. My favorite though is there's a boy named Hadara who was lost by his parents in the Sahara Desert at the age of 2, where he was adopted by ostriches.
Ooh.
What?
At age of 12, he was rescued and taken back to society and his parents.
I feel like ostriches are pretty aggressive, right?
Apparently not if they're your parents. And so I was trying to call this up. This one's from 2000. This is a recent story. So maybe not wolves, but ostriches are the way to go, because 2 is pretty freaking young. But I kind of want to look at, so ignoring the stories of other people, who have lived in the wilds, what if you were actually raised by wolves from the very start? So I kind of looked at the timetable for how the wolf moms will raise their pups, and it's not ideal for humans. So from birth to 2 weeks old, the pups are nursed by the mother. They wean on the milk. They suckle on the milk. So for the first 2 weeks, humans and wolf pups kind of do the same thing. Just chilling with the mom, drinking the milk. I'll give it to that. I assume the wolf milk won't be toxic. Who knows? But generally, you got those first 2 weeks are easy mode. Weeks 2 to 5 are slightly more complicated. So at this point, at about 3 weeks, the mom's already trying to wean the pups off the milk, which you might recognize as sooner than humans do that. And so what they do feed their pups is they will go out and hunt, and they will bring back meat, but it's regurgitated. So that they have regurgitated meat that they're feeding the pups. And so I don't know exactly the consistency of what this regurgitated meat is going to be like. I'm happy I don't. I'm happy I don't have a very clear mental image of what that's going to be. So this is where it's kind of iffy of, would you be able to eat that regurgitated meat?
I would assume no after 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's probably a no. This is also the behavior if you ever see a wolf pup licking its mom's mouth very insistently. That's actually the biological trigger for them to regurgitate the meat. So when the pups want to get fed the stomach meat, they lick the mouth of the mother, and then they do that.
It's also probably raw meat, so that's not good.
Yeah, not ideal. I mean, I feel like if you can get fed, you have a chance.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, eating raw meat is better than eating nothing, right?
Yeah. I mean, really, you might be able to make it. 5 to 10 weeks is where you start having problems, though. So at 5 to 10 weeks is when the pups abandon the den, and so they all join up. All the pups in the pack go together in what they call a rendezvous site, where it's kind of just an area where they'll gather. And so the pups, this is actually when the pups will start going out for small outings with the parents. The pups are starting to get their teeth, which means that they're no longer getting regurgitated food in this 5 to 10 week period. So this is where you're already, now what's happening is that the pack is just bringing back meat from kills directly and just being like, flop, here you go. So you're gonna have a tough time there as a 6-week-old. Among the other dangers is, this is also when the pups will start playing aggressively. And so they do a lot, wolf pups will do a lot of, they say play, but they're like wrestling and, nipping and biting to kind of develop their skills. And so a lot of times they'll bite their parents too hard, and then, and that's, how they learn not to really be nasty. But, if they are playing with each other and bite each other, if you are the tiny baby getting bit, not great for you. And then even if you could eat the food, this is also, some pups will start exhibiting hoarding behavior where they'll, lay claim on specific meats and kind of save it for later. Kind of mirror, like wolves will also hoard meat for the winter and, kind of save it a little bit. So there's a lot of bad things going around for surviving there. And then after that, you're pretty much, there's, your chances get even worse and worse. From 4 to 8 months is when the pups actually are going with the pack, and then they share in eating in the kills. So like they'll, eat it right at the source. It won't be brought back to them. And then 8 months plus, they're basically full-blown adults. Well, they'll go hunting with the pack as adults themselves. So not ideal at all. I guess I could have started with what Chris was saying, is if you're raised by wolves, you're gonna die.
And it sounds like you have a lot of options, just like me.
You do have a lot of options. And even if you're, like, theoretically, you could still say you're raised by wolves if you, at a younger age, like, from 2 or 3 when you have your teeth and you could, mimic some of these actions. The wolf pup mortality rate is 30 to 60%. So even if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing by being an actual wolf pup, your odds still aren't good. And I guess I'm unfortunately concluding on, that's kind of a sad fact now that I think about it, but I wrote it down and I said it out loud, and now everyone's stuck with it.
Yeah, we went from a lot of hamsters and like fun, happy times to one person, a fully grown adult dies, to a baby dies.
Yeah, which means we should probably stop and go to the would you rather question of the evening. All right, Chris.
Yes.
Are you ready for a would you rather?
Yes.
Okay, don't sound so excited.
Yes.
Would you rather?
Yes.
Chris is stuck.
Would you rather have a show on Animal Planet or the Food Network?
The Food Network, probably. Actually, that's a pretty easy choice for me, the Food Network.
Really? I thought you were going to say Animal Planet.
Why? Do I seem like an animal person?
Well, we've talked about how you don't like to cook and don't, currently have a working stove.
We literally had a half-hour conversation right before this podcast started about how you don't cook ever.
I don't cook ever, but a lot of...
To the point that you haven't gotten your stove fixed since you moved into your apartment.
A lot of Food Network shows is just the guy going to restaurants and watching other people cook and then eating it.
Okay, that's fair.
Oh, so you want to be like the junky one where you're just like, oh yeah, reviewing food. But I feel like you have to know how to cook.
I mean...
At least a little bit.
No, you just ask them questions. They're like, oh, this is how you do it. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know that.
But I feel like you can't just eat a thing and say, yep, that's real good. Every time.
You need...
Well, I can describe why I like it.
Oh yeah, it's crunchy. Like that crunch.
I mean, you don't have to know... in order to watch a movie, in order to be a critic of a movie, you don't need to know how to make a movie.
Yeah, but
But what if you want to be I guess it's not whether you're making a good show or not.
I guess that's a good point.
The alternative is having... Do you say Animal Planet?
Yeah.
Animal Planet.
That would be like going on safaris and stuff.
I mean, that sounds pretty cool too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, that sounds pretty... I was going to say, I want that.
But not all the time is my life.
Why not?
That's a cool vacation for a summer, I think.
If my job was to go and hang out, go on a safari or hang out with some animals and visit the woman who owns an elephant for a few days and hang out with that elephant, I think my mental health would improve a lot.
For a few days.
Forever. I would go visit the animal lady every year. Every week I would go hang out with an elephant. Are you kidding? When does that get old?
Well, what are you going to be eating on this trip?
Elephant.
The local delicacies?
Oh.
There's food all around the world. Ben, what are your thoughts? Because you're the most enthused about cooking.
Yeah, as I know we discussed off air, I don't know how much. I think we discussed it some amount on the podcast as well. I cook a lot. I really enjoy cooking, and yet, in spite of that, I'm still considering Animal Planet. I'm so confused by this, Chris. I, a person who really enjoys cooking and food, I'm still considering the Animal Planet possibility.
Like, I like food. I just don't like cooking food.
I guess.
I don't like the process of cooking because that's work. But I like eating, and people on Food Network shows eat.
I guess that's true. I don't know. I would probably say Food Network, but I like cooking, so like that it makes sense. I don't know.
So you'd be on a cooking show, and I'd be on an eating show.
I guess, is it more work to be part of a cooking? Like, I'm trying to think what is the day-to-day of a cooking show versus the animal show? Like, the cooking show, you go into the studio, you go into the kitchen, and I guess you just kind of mill around for a bit and then judge for like 10 minutes. Like,
For like, you're thinking like one of those competition shows?
yeah, or even like a competition show is probably one. Like, I think you're in the studio and you're just doing a lot of like,
Because there's a lot of different types of Food Network shows.
Right? Yeah, because you have like the traveling around, you have the competition show, and you have the person cooking show. I would do any of those. I am down for all three of those.
Right,
options.
I could still have that traveling around thing if I do like an international food show.
I feel like I would get bored of going to a lot of restaurants before I would get bored even visiting one elephant.
I mean, you have to eat anyway. You're going to have to eat. Why not get paid for it?
But if I'm gonna have to travel to like, around the country or to another country, I want my end result to be that I'd rather be excited about going to go see the elephant than just being like, oh, I'm gonna go to another restaurant. It seems like I feel like I would very quickly burn out and being like, oh, you're flying to California to go to the biggest steakhouse. Blah, 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 blah. I'd be like, okay.
You'd be going to like the best of the best though of restaurants.
Yeah, but like,
I also feel like Marcus's point is that if you have your own show and you're traveling around to places to visit animals, you're not just gonna like go home and have a bowl of rice every night. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can still eat interesting things and
yeah.
explore the area, but
I mean, it could also, I don't think one is right or wrong, except the right one is animals. But I think it's also, it's a bit of personal preference. Like, you clearly don't seem very excited about hanging out with animals at all.
I mean, I enjoy going to the zoo every once in a while, but I'm not a huge animal person. I never watch the Animal Planet. What's it called again? Animal Planet.
I never watched that there animal doohickey on the TV box.
Like, when's the last time you watched Animal Planet? I watch Food Network all the time.
He makes a compelling argument.
I mean, it's not like I watch either of them very often. I do watch more cooking shows than animal shows, but I'm more envious of the people that are going to hang out, like, that are like, you get to go to like backstage at the zoo and actually like cuddle with the tigers and things.
I mean, a lot of Animal Planet stuff, or like animal documentary stuff, is them being out in the wild. Like, you see all the interesting stuff in the documentary, but a lot of it is just them sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah, I could do that too.
And like waiting for an animal to come by.
Well, I mean, it's the same way of you picking your show. I mean, if you want to say that's like maybe the more boring one to do, but you could do the cool ones where you just like go, like one of those really soft, like soft news type shows where they just go visit the people that have cool animals, pets, and you're just like, I'm gonna hang out with all your people's pets all year.
Do they have shows like that? I actually don't know because I don't watch the Animal Planet.
It could if you pitch it to them, Chris. Go for it. This is your chance. There's a market.
Or like not like people's pets, but like like animal, handlers and things. Like they'll go and be like, oh, hey, this is whoever, and they have they take care of these animals in this zoo, and you go and you get to go inside and hang out with the animal. It's cool. I don't know. I'm excited about the animals. I'd be less excited just going to a studio and or travel to go to restaurants. Both of those seem less appealing to me.
I'm definitely more in the food camp, but I expect to be alone in the food camp, and I'm very confused that Chris is also here.
What is Chris doing?
I like food. I choose Food Network.
All right, there we have it, folks. If you enjoy this and you want to help support us and our endeavors to go see animals or eat at restaurants, You can go to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/absurdhypotheticals and hit that Become a Patron button for just $1 a month. That is like 100 cents, but when I say it that way, it sounds like a lot more than it is. It's nothing. It's $1.
It's like a quarter of a hamster.
It's like 4/4 of money.
It's like 100th of a $100 bill.
It's 100th of a $100 bill, exactly. Barely any money at all. You can show your support for the show, and you get access to our behind-the-scenes episode, which we do every month. We review all the episodes. We do some fun, cool things. We've had guests on. Ben has drank spicy milk on one of them. Lots of cool things going on there. It's a very cool, chill, hangout type vibe, and I really enjoy doing them, so I want more people to hear them. But I still have put a paywall up, so I guess I don't want it that bad.
You want money more.
But more importantly than all that is this one's episode 99, which means next episode is episode 100 of this podcast, which is 1, insane, and 2, what in the heck, and 3, when did that happen?
Next week. Hey.
But yeah, we are doing the mother of all lightning rounds. We are doing 100 hypothetical questions in hopefully 100 minutes.
That's the goal. We're going to time ourselves.
And we are timing ourselves because there's a strict punishment if we do not finish the episode in those 100 minutes.
Should we reveal the punishment now or not? Or should we keep it a secret until next week?
Let's keep it a secret until next week.
I will say this. I will say this as a way of preview. One of the steps, so it'll be a consumption punishment, I'll say. And one of the steps includes filter out the solids. So if we do not finish the 100 questions in the 100 minutes, if we go over those 100 minutes, we will need to consume the end result of that process.
We'll need to filter out some sort of solid.
I was in for it, and now that it's approaching and it's we're recording it next week, I am very, very nervous.
Well, you didn't know about the solids until I told you like a couple days ago.
Yeah, we've learned more details on the punishment in the last couple days, and it's made it feel much more real.
Yeah, and I think we also spoiled what it is in the previous behind the scenes. So if you want to find out and you're just dying curious, you could give the $1 right now and check that out.
Yeah.
That would be released. So you could do that if you want an extra sneak preview. But in any case, Godspeed to us. We're going to need it. See you at episode 100.